This year's Daytona 500 saw Ty Dillon finish last in both his 150-mile qualifying race and the 500 itself. Such a thing hadn't happened since 1992, when it involved a driver named Bob Schacht. Robert Earl Schacht was born in Lombard, Illinois, but in his racing career would soon move to Chapin, South Carolina. Schacht raced as far back as 1968, and would even compete in USAC's short-lived stock car circuit. His ARCA debut came in 1978, when he finished fourth at Indiana's 5/8 mile Ileana Motor Speedway. 2 years later, in 1980, he returned to Ileana with a vengeance. He led for 89 of 100 laps and lapped runner-up Alan Shepard 4 times. From there, Schacht competed in other stock car circuits, including ASA, IRA, ARTGO, and eventually Winston Cup. Driving his own Oldsmobile, Schacht made his Cup debut at Michigan on August 16, 1981. He started 28th in a field of 36 and finished 32nd after early transmission issues. For the next decade, Schacht found a home in ARCA, where he thrived despite never running the full season until 1995. From 1981 through 1991, he scored 13 victories, including a career-best 3 in 1983. He excelled as much at the big tracks as the small, scoring 3 wins at both Pocono and the Nashville Fairgrounds, 2 at IRP, and in 1986 beat Bob Keselowski in a 200-lap road course race at the St. Louis International Raceway, a track that was less than 1 mile in length. During this same period, Schacht qualified for just 10 Winston Cup races, never once attempted the Daytona 500. Coming into 1992, he hadn't made a Cup Series points race since October 22, 1989 at Rockingham, the day Mark Martin won his first race. Schacht finished 25th that day, only the second Cup race he actually finished under power. He also failed to finish his only Winston Open in 1990, where his Oldsmobile burned the clutch halfway through the event. But 1992 presented an opportunity. As described in my first episode of Rise of the Field Fillers, a mix of ARCA drivers and start and park entries were often called upon to help fill fields. Drivers like Mike Potter and Andy Belmont, both featured in videos on this channel, didn't even need to buy special cars to run Cup, as the technical regulations between the two series were so similar. If they made enough starts, these drivers could even compete for Rookie of the Year. The opportunity availed itself after Kenny Wallace lost his ride with Team 3 Racing, which abruptly shut its doors over the offseason. "I'm not saying anything against the ARCA guys at all," said Schacht. "I've had fun racing against them, and it's been fun winning races. But this is where the money is, and this is where you've got to be if you're going to keep on doing it. It was just time." With that, Schacht set his sights on Daytona, where he'd already made 6 starts in the ARCA 200. While Schacht was still entering his own number 75 in the upcoming 1992 ARCA season, ultimately winning at DuQuoin, his next Winston Cup ride would come with the Sadler Brothers Racing Team. Not related to Hermie and Elliott Sadler of Virginia, this team belonged to businessman Earl Sadler from Nashville. The Sadler team got its start in 1984, when Earl hired fellow Tennessean Sterling Marlin after he won Rookie of the Year. Always campaigning the number 95, the Sadler team would field cars in both Cup and the Busch Series, jump-starting the careers of drivers like Mike Alexander and Davey Allison, then much later hired others including Jeremy Mayfield and Gary Bradbury. In '91, with sponsorship from Texaco, the Sadler team made 3 starts with Eddie Bierschwal and Kerry Teague, finishing a best of 27th. Late in the '91 season, Earl Sadler asked Schacht if he was interested in driving for him the following season. After consulting with both Jeremy Mayfield and Davey Allison, Schacht agreed, so long as he could prepare the car the way he wanted. The car was a brand new dark red Oldsmobile that Schacht's own team had built. This was the car with which he won the pole in 1991's ARCA finale at Atlanta, where a flat tire left him 17th. Sadler agreed, ultimately buying the car and putting his number 95 on it, and Schacht enlisted the aid of his own crew from South Carolina. "I've got Mike Mack, David Donahue, and Donnie Yance from Columbia, John Gunter from Red Bank, Eddie Peel from Irmo, and a bunch of other guys that have helped me for a long time," he said. Serving as crew chief was Freddie Fryer, who made 6 Cup starts as a driver between 1956 and 1971. The last of these was Fryer's only start in the Daytona 500, where he ran 15th in a Dodge belonging to car owner Buster Davis. "He's a legend, an old driver who has won a lot of races," said Schacht of Fryer. "I basically needed someone to take the pressure off me and give me more time down here. Now I don't have to worry about everything." Together, Fryer, Schacht, and crew immediately turned heads with fast laps in December and January testing, laps that were much faster than with Sadler's own cars. Other teams were sure they were running illegal parts. But when we came back, we were one of 4 cars that went through inspection the first time, said Schacht. This was an even greater accomplishment, as Gary Nelson had just taken over technical inspection. I can't see wasting your time practicing with legal stuff and having to come down here for speed weeks and start all over. In qualifying for the 1992 Daytona 500, Schacht was as fast as ever. He ranked 19th of the 48 entrants, with a surprising speed of 188.225 miles per hour. His was fastest of 10 Oldsmobiles, trailing only Harry Gant, and second fastest of the rookies, bested only by 4th place Dorsey Schrader, driving for Junie Donlavey. This put Schacht 9th on the grid for race 2 of the twin 125s. Joining associate sponsor Texaco on the Schacht car was Shoney's, as Earl Sadler was on the company's board of directors. While race 1 featured wreck after wreck, ultimately securing starting spots for Kerry Teague, Dale McCowart, and Mike Potter, race 2 was slowed by just one single car spin. By then, Schacht had long since pulled behind the wall. After just 7 laps, the battery had shaken itself loose, causing a short, and the engine lost power. But thanks to his fast qualifying speed, he still secured the 36th starting spot in Sunday's field of 42. I'm realistic, said Schacht. I don't think I'm going to win the race, but if we can run in the top 20 and finish there, I think we'll have done a pretty good job for a bunch of guys from Columbia. In the race, Schacht pulled down in front of Buddy Baker, who raced him hard for the first few laps. But again, after just 7 laps, Schacht's car began to run loose, then lost power, forcing an unscheduled trip down pit road. When the crew lifted the hood, a fan blade, one from a brand new fan, protruded from the bottom of his radiator. Unbeknownst to Schacht, he'd been sliding in his own water as his engine overheated. With that, his day was done. Following Daytona, Schacht planned to compete in at least 12 of the remaining 28 races in 1992, both rounds at Atlanta, Talladega, Charlotte, Michigan, and Pocono, plus the Southern 500 at Darlington and the fall race at Rockingham. He'd ultimately qualify for 8, adding the spring race at Darlington, where he led 2 laps and finished a strong 19th, the second best finish of his entire career. Most incredibly, thanks in part to his Daytona 500 start, while Andy Belmont failed to qualify, Schacht led the Rookie of the Year standings until May, when Jimmy Hensley inherited Chad Little's full-time ride with Cale Yarborough Motorsports. Ultimately, Schacht ranked 4th, behind Hensley, Belmont, and Dave Mater III. Schacht's slide down the standings occurred as Sadler further reduced his part-time schedule, citing costs. The two parted ways by the summer. The Sadlers really didn't have the money to do it the way it needed to be done, he said, so I just thought it better for both of us if we parted company. Schacht next joined Jim Rosenblum, today the owner of FDNY Racing in the Craftsman Truck Series, who was renting motors from Raymock Enterprises. His last 2 starts came with Doug Stringer, including the famous Hooters 500, where he qualified 28th and finished 33rd. Schacht would ultimately make 23 Cup Series starts. The last came on July 17, 1994, a last-place finish after 11 laps around Pocono. From then on, Schacht would focus almost exclusively on ARCA, both as driver and team owner. In 1998, he scored his 17th and last series win at Memphis. In 2016, he made his 183rd and final series start at the New Jersey Motorsports Park. Across 28 seasons, Schacht had fielded cars for himself and 48 other drivers, including Brian Scott, Frank Kimmel, and Red Farmer. But the 1992 season, where he finished last in both the 125-mile qualifier and the Daytona 500, was his only attempt at the Great American Race.
In America, there exists a sport that is driven by the fans. They are why everyone works so hard, on the teams and at the tracks, in front of the grandstands and behind the scenes, to give the fans the greatest race possible. NASCAR fans deserve the best, starting from the high banks of Daytona, all the way to the shores of California, and at every race in between. NASCAR fans, you're the reason for our success. Thanks.